Resveratrol is a polyphenol abundant in red wine, and it has some antioxidant and heart protective properties. However, its bioavailability is poor, and most of its purported benefits have not been confirmed in humans. Resveratrol is a small polyphenol that came to scientific attention during the 1990s. Since then, it's been hyped by supplement manufacturers and news outlets. Resveratrol is high in grape skin, as grapes produce resveratrol in defense against toxins and parasites. It's also found in various berries, peanuts, soy, and a Japanese tea made from knotweed. Limited studies have explored its antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-aging, and phytoestrogen activity. Resveratrol does hold some potential for improving chronic diseases. Researchers are also exploring its ability to mimic the effects of calorie restriction in animals, which may also affect lifespan. Some of resveratrol's benefits are as an antioxidant, it may be anti-aging, it may activate detoxification genes, it may support brain and heart health, it may help fight infections, it's safe when consumed from wine or foods, but it may cause nausea or an upset stomach. According to some clinical trials, resveratrol nose sprays may improve symptoms of hay fever or allergic rhinitis. Scientists came up with the nose spray as a great way to bypass resveratrol's poor bioavailability and get it straight to a localized problematic area in the body. In one study of 100 people, an intranasal spray containing a 0.1% resveratrol reduced nasal symptoms, and it improved quality of life in adults with hay fever who used it 3 times daily for 4 weeks. In another clinical trial, 68 children with pollen-induced hay fever used an intranasal spray with resveratrol at 0.05%, and it had one other ingredient, beta-glucan, at 0.33%, and this improved itching, sneezing, runny nose, and nasal blockage. This was also given 3 times a day for 2 months. Limited evidence suggests that red wine, in moderation, supports heart health. On the other hand, resveratrol supplements probably don't aid in heart disease prevention. Therefore, scientists think that other compounds in red wine may be more important, while resveratrol may or may not contribute to the effect. Additional large-scale studies are needed to determine the specific effects of the different components in red wine, especially in people with blood pressure and heart problems. In 67 men at high heart disease risk, alcohol-free red wine reduced blood pressure, both diastolic and systolic, after 4 weeks. It increased nitric oxide, which relaxes blood vessels. Regular red wine also slightly reduced blood pressure, and it increased nitric oxide, but less so than de-alcoholized wine. A control group that only drank gin didn't see any benefits. One analysis of 19 studies concluded that drinking 1 to 2 glasses of wine per day, 150 milliliters to 300 milliliters, reduces heart disease risk. Interestingly, based on the study, the alcohol in red wine may actually reduce the beneficial effects of resveratrol and other polyphenols. This especially holds true for people who already have high blood pressure and those at high risk. In healthy people, though, moderate intake of red wine may indeed improve heart health. In a study of 80 healthy people, a small amount of red wine, 100 milliliters per day, over 3 weeks boosted blood vessel health, nitric oxide, and the number of cells that regenerate blood vessels, known as endothelial progenitor cells. Drinking water, beer, or vodka didn't achieve the same effects. In cells, resveratrol increased the enzyme that makes nitric oxide synthase. According to animal and cellular studies, resveratrol also reduced the formation of plaques in the arteries, known as atherosclerosis. It also reduced the clumping of platelets, reduced blood lipids, and it lowers inflammatory substances that increase the risk of atherosclerosis. In cells, resveratrol increases the expression of PON1 gene, which reduces inflammation, and it helps detoxify pesticides and drugs. Clinical studies suggest that drinking small amounts of red wine daily might support heart health, but resveratrol supplements probably don't. Researchers are investigating the effects of resveratrol on liver disease and bile flow. Most clinical research suggests that resveratrol is not beneficial for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. According to one analysis of 4 small clinical studies, resveratrol from 300 to 3,000 milligrams per day, taken for 3 months, does not affect liver enzymes, insulin resistance, or weight in patients with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. In animals, it prevented and it improved conditions of obstructed bile flow. It also prevented liver damage in animals with sepsis or blood poisoning from serious infections. These effects remain to be explored in clinical studies. Resveratrol likely doesn't improve non-alcoholic liver disease, but its other purported effects on liver health remain unexplored in humans. One study suggests that resveratrol helps with glucose metabolism. In 11 healthy but obese men, resveratrol at 150 milligrams per day increased insulin sensitivity, and it lowered blood sugar levels after 30 days. However, additional clinical studies are lacking. Therefore, existing evidence does not support the use of resveratrol for lowering the blood sugar. It also raised the SIRT1 gene and the PGC1A. The SIRT1 is an enzyme crucial for turning off harmful genes that increase fat deposits, blood sugar, and inflammation in the body, while the PGC1A support healthy mitochondria. Resveratrol lowered blood sugar in studies on rats with diabetes. It prompts cells to take in more glucose, which reduces insulin resistance. Resveratrol also protects the insulin-secreting beta cells in the pancreas, which helps to increase insulin when it's low and to decrease it when it's too high. Scientists have yet to explore resveratrol's effect on insulin resistance and diabetes in humans. Despite some promising early findings, it's still unclear whether resveratrol supports healthy blood sugar control in people who are at risk of type 2 diabetes. According to one research team, resveratrol may help balance the response to estrogen, which affects reproductive health in both men and women. In male rats, resveratrol increased testosterone and sperm count without any adverse effects. Scientists think it may activate the HPG, the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, that controls sex hormone release from the hypothalamus via the pituitary in the brain. In women, resveratrol may act in a somewhat different way. In one clinical trial of 40 postmenopausal women, resveratrol at 1 gram per day for 12 weeks didn't affect estrogen or testosterone, but it increased the protein that binds sex hormones and carries them through the blood, sex hormone binding globulin, by 10%. It also improved estrogen metabolism, which may lower the risk of breast cancer. In animals, it blocks the enzyme that makes estrogen, called aromatase, and it mildly activates estrogen receptors. Resveratrol binds to estrogen receptors much weaker than estrogen does, which has a balancing effect. It may help increase estrogen-like activity when the female sex hormone is low, such as after menopause, or decrease it when it's too high. More human studies are needed. Based on limited evidence, resveratrol may affect some hormonal and metabolic markers in postmenopausal women. In a clinical trial of 20 people with acne, a gel with resveratrol showed positive results over 2 months. It reduced acne severity by almost 70% and it improved overall skin health by over 50%, with no adverse effects. The team discovered that cosmetic products with resveratrol are stable and they don't degrade when kept in the fridge at 4 degrees Celsius. Scientists believe that resveratrol may have dual antioxidant activities, as a direct antioxidant and as a compound that may increase other antioxidant enzymes, genes, and pathways. Antioxidant claims underlie many of its purported health benefits. Based on this theory, oxidative stress and inflammation trigger or worsen numerous diseases, from heart disease to diabetes to cancer and even cognitive decline. Resveratrol increased antioxidant enzymes in cellular and animal studies, including SOD and NRF2, which are crucial components of the detox hub and the antioxidant defense. Glutathione, heme oxygenase 1, which breaks down heme from hemoglobin to antioxidants and iron. Catalase, which protects from oxidative damage. And sirtuins and SART enzymes, which turn off age-related genes and protect proteins. At the same time, limited studies suggest that resveratrol reduces free radicals and inflammatory substances. Scientists are investigating whether resveratrol activates antioxidant enzymes in cells and animals, but human data is still not available. Aside from its indirect antioxidant effect on inflammation, resveratrol is theorized to affect specific inflammatory processes. For one, it may block inflammatory COX enzymes, which are also the main target of commonly used painkillers and anti-inflammatory drugs, like non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. However, resveratrol's mechanism and anti-inflammatory potential hasn't been clinically confirmed yet. Some scientists suspect that resveratrol also blocks some of the following inflammatory players, like NF-kappa B pathway, one of the most important and deeply rooted triggers of inflammation in the body, according to some theories. The HMGB1, which is a protein made by immune cells that causes inflammation and tissue damage in autoimmune diseases like arthritis. And STAT3, which may contribute to problems in people with chronic inflammation and autoimmune diseases like irritable bowel disease, obesity, cancer, or a Th1 to Th17 dominance. Researchers propose the resveratrol acts on several anti-inflammatory pathways, but this hasn't yet been proven in humans. Based on animal and cell research, they hypothesize that resveratrol may combat some age-related disorders by mimicking the effects of calorie restriction, which increases lifespan in animals, by reducing oxidative stress and inflammation on multiple levels, such as enzymes, immune cells, and gene expression, and by activating SART1, which turns off genes that promote aging. One of the theories that scientists use to explain aging involves so-called cellular senescence. With aging, cells become senescent and less resilient to stress. They lose their function and they start producing inflammatory substances. This loss of function and inflammation on a cellular level then extends to organs and tissues. The brain, heart, muscles, skin, and gut, and the body as a whole, also start to degenerate and lose function, especially if the body cannot or does not eliminate the dysfunctional cells through a process called autophagy. SART1 is an enzyme that can turn off genes that trigger cellular senescence. Scientists are wondering if by activating the SART1, resveratrol may epigenetically hinder the aging process, at least based on the cellular studies. Autophagy is a normal process that triggers the destruction of damaged cells, recycling the products of broken down cells to make new, healthy ones. Autophagy is our body's main quality control officer. Some theories have linked aging and age-related diseases to impaired autophagy, though these theories are still a topic of research and they have yet to be confirmed or rejected. Autophagy theories also led to a recent boom in calorie restriction practices. Calorie restriction is said to promote longevity and healthy aging by activating autophagy. However, calorie restriction is not safe for everyone. It may be especially tricky for older or thin people who struggle to get enough nutrients in their diet. In animal studies, resveratrol confers similar benefits to calorie restriction, and it increases autophagy induction without the need to reduce daily calorie intake. These effects have not been investigated in humans yet, though. Clinical studies are needed to determine whether or not resveratrol can extend lifespan in humans. Some scientists hypothesize that resveratrol turns on the anti-aging pathways like SIRT1 and autophagy, but they've only tested their theories in cells and animals so far. Glial cells, specific astrocytes, provide support and protection to neurons, and their damage or dysfunction is linked to many brain-related diseases. One of the ways in which astrocytes protect neurons is by removing excess glutamate, which is a neurotransmitter, from the synapses and the extracellular space that surrounds the neurons. Excess glutamate in the brain can lead to excitotoxicity and ultimately neuronal damage or even death. In a cellular study, resveratrol increased their glutamate uptake. Theoretically, this is linked to better protection from brain degradation and stroke. However, we can't draw this conclusion from a cell-based study yet. In animal studies, resveratrol reduced seizures and protected the hippocampus, the brain's main memory hub. It also increased insulin growth factor 1 in the hippocampus, and this may improve cognition. One research group suggested that resveratrol may protect the brain by acting on the gut-brain axis. According to this unproven theory, resveratrol's potential benefits may not even depend on it being absorbed and passing the blood-brain barrier. In mice, resveratrol stimulated gut nerves, which passed the signal on to the hippocampus. Resveratrol was undetectable in the hippocampus and improved cognition only by activating nerves in the gut. In a study on brain cells, resveratrol increased the activity of the antioxidant gene heme oxygenase, which protects the brain from damage. The effect was enhanced by melatonin. In mice with late-onset Alzheimer's disease, long-term resveratrol supplementation reduced cognitive impairment and disease biomarkers. It could also activate AMPK, which maintains energy balance in the brain under challenging conditions. Nonetheless, clinical studies have not yet examined the effects of resveratrol on brain health. Thus, the purported benefits remain unproven. Some scientists believe that the gut microbiome can protect against diseases of the arteries. In one study, resveratrol protected blood vessels in mice without APOE. It stopped harmful bacteria in their guts from secreting harmful oxidative substances, and it balanced their microbiome. It increased beneficial gut bacteria, which raised the production of bile acids. According to some, resveratrol may counter low bile production and the weaker ability to eliminate cholesterol in people with heart disease. However, clinical trials are lacking to support such claims. No clinical evidence supports the use of resveratrol in people who struggle with obesity. The existing animal research should guide future human studies, though. In mice fed a high-fat diet, resveratrol reduced oxidative stress, and it prevented the death of protective immune cells called Tregs. Resveratrol stopped fat cells from making new fats, and it triggered their death. In cell-based studies, it accomplishes this by turning off genes that cause weight gain, while activating genes that enhance energy use and mitochondrial health. Additionally, resveratrol may boost weight loss by blocking several key fat-creating enzymes. Stem cells in the connective tissue are presented with several possibilities: to develop into fat cells, bone-building cells, joint or muscle cells. Resveratrol activates the fat-burning pathway, which blocks the genes that increase fat storage. This epigenetic shift causes stem cells to develop into bone-building cells, and this may boost bone health. According to some, resveratrol may synergize with vitamin D and vitamin K2 to protect the bones and to increase their mineralization. The effects of resveratrol on cancer prevention in humans are unknown. Scientists are investigating resveratrol for its potential to prevent cancer, especially liver cancer and some other cancer cell types. In mice, resveratrol applied to the skin before UVB exposure prevented skin cancers. Given orally, it was active against esophageal cancer in rats. Since resveratrol is an antioxidant phytoestrogen, some scientists are investigating its effect on breast cancer. In cells, it blocks the enzyme aromatase, which makes estrogen. High activity of this enzyme and high estrogen level worsens a common type of breast cancer that has receptors for estrogen. In animal studies, resveratrol prevented and reduced the growth of breast cancer. Clinical studies have yet determined its efficacy and safety in breast cancer patients. Aside from its hormonal effects, scientists are wondering whether resveratrol can regulate another cancer enzyme called topoisomerase. In cells from a deadly brain tumor, a glioblastoma, resveratrol blocked the activity of this cancer enzyme, which should guide further research efforts. According to some unproven theories, resveratrol may increase muscle-building pathways and block processes that degrade proteins. For example, it increased the size of fish and it enhanced their muscle growth in one study. In another study, resveratrol supplementation enhanced the exercise training response, the upper muscle strength, and the aerobic performance in rats. Scientists are questioning if its effects stem from epigenetic changes like activating fat and sugar-burning SIRT1 and other molecules that heighten energy levels like AMPK and PGCA. In mice, high-dose resveratrol had a good anti-radiation effect. It prevented the decline in bone marrow and white blood cells from the radiation, helping to maintain proper immune function. It also increased the antioxidant and the detox enzyme SOD without causing adverse effects. Scientists have found that noise increases free radicals, which can cause ear damage and hearing loss. In mice who were exposed to damaging noise, resveratrol protected against hearing loss by neutralizing free radicals and by improving blood flow in the ears. In a different rat study, resveratrol prevented ear damage from the toxic chemotherapy drug cisplatin. Resveratrol has some virus-fighting action. According to cell-based and animal studies, it was effective against the herpes virus infection in duck and geese as well as in cells. Viruses that cause both oral herpes and genital herpes, the influenza virus, which causes the common cold, and the Epstein-Barr virus, which can cause infectious mononucleosis. Resveratrol has shown antiviral activity against viruses that cause lung infections in mice and in cells. Its effect on lung infections is enhanced in combination with quercetin. HIV-1 in synergism with the anti-HIV drug Dectibane, the virus that causes chickenpox, viruses linked to gut infections, and the African swine fever virus. Resveratrol was researched against Candida albicans yeast in a cell-based study. Resveratrol was active against MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, in bacterial samples from infected patients. Scientists are investigating its synergy with luteolin and quercetin in other cell-based studies. Resveratrol has showed antibacterial activity against ulcer-causing E. coli, acne-causing bacteria, STD-causing bacteria, and diarrhea-causing bacteria. Resveratrol alone, and by SART1 activation, might increase sensitivity to vitamin D. Resveratrol can activate the vitamin D receptor, which increases the response to vitamin D and its activity in the body. Resveratrol increases the binding of calcitrol, and this also is crucial for the proper activity of vitamin D. Resveratrol is being researched for reducing pain and inflammation. In animal studies, resveratrol given directly into the brain reduced the sensitivity of pain. Its pain-relieving effects could be due to its ability to block the COX-1 and the COX-2 inflammatory enzymes, the same targets of the commonly used non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug painkillers. Oral resveratrol also reduced pain and inflammation in mice, but injections had a stronger effect. In another study, resveratrol decreased hard-to-treat neuropathic pain in mice. While its oral bioavailability is still unclear, some people suggest that a way to bypass this is to use resveratrol cream locally, applied directly to painful areas such as joints or the back. Although resveratrol can penetrate the skin, it's unlikely the concentrations present in most cosmetic products could have any effect. Resveratrol blocked enzymes that take noradrenaline and serotonin back into brain cells from neurons in rat brains, and this increases their concentration in the synapse. By increasing serotonin activity in the brain, resveratrol may boost mood, at least theoretically. Resveratrol also blocks MAO, which is MAOA and MAOB, enzymes that break down monoamine neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which are equally important for mood. Resveratrol blocks MAOA more than MAOB. MAOA is called the warrior gene because some of its genetic variations are linked to increased violence and aggressiveness. This gene codes for the enzyme MAOA that breaks down neurotransmitters like noradrenaline, adrenaline, serotonin, and dopamine. High levels of this enzyme may imply fewer neurotransmitters available in the brain. This is because more neurotransmitters are being broken down at a faster rate. On the other hand, low levels of this enzyme imply more neurotransmitters are in the brain. MAOA balance is key. You don't want it to be too high or too low, because both situations may have negative effects. Based on this, some people claim the resveratrol is better suited for those people who are predisposed to high MAO activity, as it blocks this enzyme and it can compensate for potentially low neurotransmitter levels. MAOB is similar to MAOA, but it plays a more important role in the risk for Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's. Overactivity of this gene may lower levels of dopamine and other neurotransmitters in areas of the brain that are important for the onset of these diseases. Resveratrol also blocks MAOB, but the effect is more modest. You may not have heard of mTOR, but it's one of the body's key regulators behind the scenes. This enzyme controls the activity of over 800 other proteins. Its expression is usually increased in times of plentiful nutrient intake and decreased in times of stress and calorie restriction. And while it does increase energy production, it also increases waste products and reduces repair processes, including autophagy, all of which trigger autoimmune problems in the long run. Resveratrol blocks the mTOR signaling in a unique way, according to cell-based studies. An overactive mTOR has been linked to autoimmunity and cancer. While scientists are exploring whether reducing mTOR activity may help to prevent these diseases while also promoting longevity. Clinical studies have yet to determine if resveratrol affects autoimmunity, neurotransmitters, pain, and vitamin D sensitivity. Resveratrol is a polyphenol found mostly in grape skin and red wine. Some berries, legumes, and a tea made from Japanese knotweed also contain it. Based on the available evidence, drinking red wine in moderation possibly supports cardiovascular health, but taking resveratrol supplements does not. Its most promising use relies on applying specific formulas to localized body areas, for example, as a nose spray with resveratrol, as this may help with hay fever. Gels with resveratrol are also being developed for improving acne.